Hello, my name's Nick Harris. I'm a UK-based illustrator working mostly in children's illustration, and today we're going to be trying to do a character that's way too overloaded with something. Because I'm quite into the medieval period, I've plumped to do a squire dealing with his knight's spare kit, which happens to include a horse. I know, it's very silly. First thing I did was I went online and I googled carrying heavy loads, and there's all sorts of fantastic images of people carrying remarkable amounts of stuff. You just wouldn't believe. Well, I didn't believe it because I've never had to do anything like that, but it looks almost cartoon, some of the things that they're carrying, ridiculous amounts. So this really is comparatively quite modest, but I will try and beef things up a bit. I did an original the original sketch was done in SketchBook Pro, just because I quite like drawing in that, and that and the other sketches are what are pinned up at the left. You can do that in ArtRage. We're in ArtRage, so I didn't mention that. Did I mention that? And having brought that sketch in, I'm now tidying it up, just trying to make the lines a bit cleaner, the shapes a bit cleaner, build up some solid volumes so that the thing makes sense. I want the horse plopped on his shoulders, his knees buckling with the weight, and then I'm planning to add more shapes on top, sort of boxes and rolls of stuff, cylinders, bits of armour, various bits and pieces. I'm working mostly with the pencil tool, and the tone is done with the watercolour tool on a separate layer. I find that's just a nice way to get the simple shapes down in the first place. You can then put solid colour underneath and also build up more shadows over the top with more layers of watercolour. I set the layers of watercolour to multiply rather than the watercolour blend mode. I'm more familiar with that, and I know it will translate into other software like Photoshop. I don't use Photoshop, I use Page Plus. Sorry, not Page Plus, Photo Plus. I do use Page Plus as well, but not for photo editing. Serif Photo Plus. It's just the way I've gone in terms of software. I'm on a PC. Tidying stuff up, adding a bits more detail here and there to try and make it more convincing. A bridle, for instance, some kind of horse blanket, a padded horse blanket, perhaps with a sort of a leather rim to it. Then I'll put a big box on the top here, drawing. Keep the shapes basic so that you can build up the volumes and give them the feeling of weight. You can add all sorts of different shapes if you want to. I'm just going for simple shapes at the moment because they're easier to work with, and then I will try and make the materials look like they're heavy. Like the box, I will try and make it look more like a heavy chest, which has got metal support, sort of like a metal lined top to it, that kind of thing. Adding a bit more tone to build up the lighting, using a different colour to start giving more nuance and subtlety to it. This is on a separate layer to the warm tone that's used before. Another favourite tool of mine is the wet blender. It's one of the palette knife tools in ArtRage, and it gives really nice soft edges where you want them. The horse is made up, so the anatomy is a bit dodgy. Well, a lot dodgy. Did actually find a picture of a man carrying a horse. Well, you know, you go to the supermarket, you haven't got any bags, or if your horse gets a flat, carry at home. Again, back with the original colour. Again, just trying to build up the feeling of solidity and volume, because for this to work, things have to feel solid and heavy. The pose will do a certain amount, but if the things look like they're made of balloon or filled with helium, it's just not going to look right. I've got the figure sort of hunched slightly forward to balance the weight, and the knees, as I said, crumpling slightly under the weight. Something else that makes loads awkward to carry, if ever you've done any humping things around, like furniture, stuff like that, things that stick out the side and get caught on whatever is there. I was going to say something rude then. It's Murphy's Law. Let's say Murphy's Law, that if it can catch on something, it will. So that would make it seem a more awkward load to carry than just the weight. As you can see, I've added some more layers of solid colour underneath the tone to make it feel much more solid now. The solid layers I do with the chalk tool. That's another favourite tool of mine. I'm using very bold colours because it's a medieval thing. I can get away with that. They did have these kind of colours in some of their livery. That was a word I was looking for earlier when I was talking about the horse. Livery. To make things even more difficult, I've got him going upstairs as well. Let's really give this guy a hard time. Now I need a bit of interest in the background, so using some texture stencils, I've used a chalk tool working through a stencil to add some texture to make it more stone-like in the background. And I've also added shafts of light coming down at him, because that, again, it feels like things are pressing down on him more. And also you can get a bit of chiaroscuro, contrast of light and dark. You can make it more dramatic looking. He pings a bit at the moment. He sticks out too. There's too much in lighting. I'll put a layer of shadow over him last thing to make him integrate with the scene better. You want a strained expression on his face, ideally. Got great hair. It's about the same as mine. But with his lips clamped shut with the strain, and maybe his eyes could be bulging, or they could be closed with the strain. At the moment it looks like they're closed. But the strain can show in his neck as well, with the sinews sticking out, those blood vessels. It's not really detailed enough for me to get blood vessels pulsing on his forehead. I think I'll have his eyes open, because he is trying to look where he's going. Because maybe this is something he does on a regular basis for his night, however annoying and however strenuous. Is he young with grey hair? Is he old with grey hair? Does he just look very old because of all the strain? You can make all this backstory stuff up as you go along to try and make it. Then that will lead to different ideas as you go. He's desperately trying to balance the horse with his mitts, sort of on the various parts of the horse. You're only going to see one hand. The other hand's going to be behind the sort of ballast bag at the back. I'll work that hand up a little bit more, the one on the right of the picture, his left hand. Still going back to his face, working with line, making it a hard line, his mouth a hard line. People always look at faces, so trying to get an expression that works is quite important for something like this. I mean, the pose is important, but his expression, people would look at that. And also when you're really straining, sometimes your face goes really red. Some people don't, they go very pale. But I want him to go red. That's probably a bit much. I'll knock that back. I'm doing that with watercolour at the moment on a layer set to multiply. as I do with the shadows and everything else. And I will just keep working at that, and I will keep fettling at everything else as well. It is how I work, just on lots of layers, merging them together when necessary. That's making a bit more sense now. Yeah, yep. His mouth and his chin makes a bit more sense. And we'll just go through a few more stages. It's as much about the pose as anything else. His feet sort of pinned to the floor flat by the weight. Knees desperately struggle to get them straight so that he can actually walk where he's trying to go instead of being pushed where he doesn't want to go by the weight and being unbalanced. So yeah, I've worked up that hand a bit more now. It's probably a bit small, his head's a bit big. A combination of both. It's making more sense now, but you see he pops too much at the moment. So what I've done, I've turned it into a portrait format and put a layer of shadow over him to make him integrate better. I hope that works. I hope that gives you a few pointers on someone overloaded. Catch you next time. Bye.